This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Well, hello everyone. This is Dr. Fred, and welcome to the next wonderful episode of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. It is an honor and privilege to really be at the front edge of this podcast and to share with you my guests as listeners, to really share with you while I'm learning about these people, while I'm dealing with these people, while I'm interacting, while I'm being blown away or asking, or all the many things I'm doing in my conversation. It's really fun to get the feedback that this is having a positive effect on you and your life. What a deep honor, a deep pleasure. It's actually what I feel like I was put on the planet to do, is to bring education, to bring wisdom, to bring pleasure to those around me. I think we all share that, as a possibility. And today we have the opportunity to do that once again. And I say once again as if we've done it 62 times before now. And maybe we have, sort of the it, like, okay, let's do it again. But that's not really what we're doing here. We're having a new conversation. We're having a new, completely exciting new conversation starting from right now, a conversation that's never been had and never been had between me and my guest. Not at all. Sheila James is my guest today. And although Sheila and I have had plenty of discourse, plenty of opportunity to share with each other across the airwaves, we share a bit of a language in our relationship to landmark education and other growth and development courses that we've been in. And we've certainly been able to raise our eyebrows at what both of us say in any of those classrooms. And now is an opportunity for me to share Sheila James with you. And it really is, as you're about to get, a deep privilege to share someone of this magnitude, of this level of magnificence, of this level of beauty with you. So today, here we have it. Sheila James, welcome to Humanity.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It's such an honor and privilege to be with you in this conversation, Dr. Fred.
It's really, really, really great. And you're very, very welcome. Before the show started, I just briefing, make sure that Sheila's got her shoulders up and everything's going right. And for sure she did. And she's very eager to get started. And Sheila, I asked you if you had listened to any of the previous episodes, and I think you mentioned Rita, who a mutual beautiful friend of ours. And now it's an opportunity to really take on the question I asked most of my guests to start. So I call it the 9-letter question. So it's a full question, grammatically correct, and there's only 9 letters in it. Here's the question. Sheila James, who are you? Who are you?
Oh, wow.
Right. Isn't that interesting? It's such a simple question, and oh, wow is really about the only answer you have before you really dig in to tell us. And you can go any way here, Sheila. I'm not going to lock you down. Any way you want with who are you?
Wow. Well, I wasn't expecting that question, but here's what I would say. There are things maybe I do in life and have done in life. And who I am is the daughter of the late, great Reverend and Mrs. Julius James of Gary, Indiana. And my father was a major influencer in the world, a friend to colleague Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, Dr. Otis Moss, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, which some of you may or may not know some of these people. But these were people who were having a conversation and introduced me to social injustice and what it takes to make a difference in the world. So who I am is a little girl with a mischievous ear who listened and learned intently from their wisdom. And that for me was the beginning of my own quest to make a difference for humanity. So I'm the little girl who listened.
Yeah, listens with a discerning ear. Each and every one of us is really dealing with something, right? No matter whether we're tackling some of the big problems in the world or maybe even the tiny ones, we all face challenges. Now, I've been a psychiatrist for many years, and I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can really count, from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. So naturally, over time, I've developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. Now, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of those methodologies, and I'm going public, revealing the process and associated mindset that contributed to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out in my new book called Creative Aid: Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in audiobook format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative Aid today. I really look forward to hearing about your Creative Aid breakthrough. Now, let's get back to this amazing conversation. Welcome to humanity. Not all of us had the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. over our house for dinner, or Benjamin Mays or Coretta. Not every one of us had this as sort of our extended family. And you're
Yes.
right, you didn't just have them as extended family. You were overhearing, like, the first language you were really hearing from adults, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, was really speaking to not only social injustice, but what can be done about, like, what are we going to do here? Like, what's next? Like, how are we going to take this on? And my goodness, what year are we talking about? Early 60s, late 50s? Where are we
Early
here?
60s.
Yeah.
I was born in 1957. And you got to remember, so this was actually by the time I was even born, Mrs. King was doing a concert at our church 3 weeks after I was born. And I have the program of it. So I said, wow, she probably held me back then. And her son, Marty the third, was born that November. So she was pregnant at that time. And by the way, it wasn't just dinner, because back then, blacks or African Americans, what have you, were not allowed to stay in hotels. So they stayed in our homes. These,
Hmm.
they didn't go somewhere and stay in
Good point.
hotels. So from the time I was a child, and then by the time my first encounter with Dr. King, I share about it. Now, it wasn't my first, it's the first I remember. He came, and my brother and sister, who were a year or two younger than me, came upstairs and said, Sheila, one of Daddy's friends just gave us $1. I said, what? So of course I ran downstairs, saw Dr. King, sat in his lap, talked to him a few minutes, and he gave me my dollar. Okay. That was the most exciting thing of the day. So I would say by the time I remember I was 6 or 7, that I
Mhm.
start remembering some of the things that happened.
Okay, so we're talking about, I mean, if we're really going to talk about 1963 or 1964, there's some incredible things going on. Incredible things going on.
Yeah.
As I remember, the president of the United States of America had his head blown off right about then, and there was some important things going on in the world, in the South. There was important things going on. There was a war about to begin overseas in Southeast Asia. No, it already had begun. There's the rise of one Cassius Clay turned Muhammad Ali. There's all sorts of things
Yes.
going on that are huge, that these people actually were about to put their footprint on forever, for, like, in the world of forever, including, of course, your father and mother. But tell us a little bit about what you saw there, and when did that's a sweet story that your first dollar came from actually Martin Luther King Jr. directly while you're sitting in his lap. That's awesome. And it's sweet. It's really whimsical and beautiful, but there's something else going on, Sheila, right then. While that's happening, in November of 63, our president gets assassinated, and all sorts of other things are going on behind the closed doors. There's just too much going on for me to even know. And here I am. I'm a white boy from Detroit around that time, born 1 year after you. And my brothers are activists, and my parents care a lot. But my goodness, I sure wasn't living in, is it Atlanta? Were you down in Atlanta or Montgomery?
We were in Gary, Indiana.
Oh, you were up north, not so far from us, actually.
Yes, and my father had a church there, St. John Baptist Church. Gosh, you said what you said, and it just makes me start to think of some of the pictures we have with my dad and Dr. King. My dad was invited to Rome, Italy, to the Vatican to teach and met the Pope, etc. This was all happening. We were dealing with, I never forget, I was watching TV and men were walking around with those signs, I am a man. And I was like, well, Daddy, why do they have to have a sign? So it was constant him communicating, and he always communicated really in a way where he wasn't making something wrong. He was really out for humanity, making a difference, develop people being proud of who they are and being respected. So it was always a stand for something or someone. So that got ingrained in me at a very, very young age. I mean, the first the first black mayor in the United States of America was Richard Gordon Hatcher of Gary, Indiana.
Wow.
Yeah, my father was instrumental in that. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mrs. King endorsed him because the mayor we had was pretty great. There was nothing wrong. But this was like a first. And then up the road from us in Chicago was a magazine, Jet and Ebony, which was something that communicated clearly all the things that were happening in America, particularly with the Black community. And then there was another magazine, I believe it was by the NAACP, but I'm not sure, called The Crisis. So, as kids and children, while we played and laughed and had fun, we were constantly engaged and involved in what was happening in this country, and we were a part of it.
As kids and children, because you've mentioned your siblings already a couple times, it sounds like you have two younger siblings. Is that it? Just three of you as
Oh
the
God.
crew? There's a whole bunch
No,
of you.
I'm the middle child of seven.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yes, yes, I'm the middle child of seven. They had three. My parents also lived in Georgia after my dad finished Morehouse College, which is in Atlanta. That's where he and Dr. King and Otis Moss and some of the greatest leaders of our time, the greatest theologians, Dr. Howard Thurman, some of these people you read about in the history books, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who was the president emeritus of Morehouse College, to put his hands on a certain group of men, a certain kind of leadership in those men emerged, and it was spread out, they spread out through the United States. So it was very, very, oh God, I get chills thinking about it.
I love
It
it.
was
I
very
love it.
powerful.
We feel your chills. Keep going. You're doing great.
Yeah, it was very powerful, very, very palpable. I remember stories of my mom sharing with us that Mrs. King and Dr. King, it was either their first wedding anniversary or the king's anniversary or my parents. They had rice and beans because that was about all they could afford on the first wedding anniversary. They
Mm.
got together. So when my father moved from, he was actually in Rockmart, Georgia for a while, preaching at a church. He moved from there to Gary, Indiana when he got called to preach there. And I'm telling you, Dr. Fred, this was when men were men. My father wore a
Hmm.
suit and a tie every day.
For sure.
Even when he barbecued in a leisure suit, you
For
know?
sure. I got it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so it was that kind of being around, and that was in the neighborhood too. So it was getting on the community. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And there was a sense of pride and a sense of dignity. And again, one of the biggest things I see is we were very connected and very educated.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how that was as a child.
It's interesting. So thank you for that. And really
Yeah.
thank you for, if we stopped right now, this would be a complete gem to just contribute, but we are not
Yes.
about to do that. So let's roll on. Connected and educated. We
Mm-hmm.
are looking at a group with pride and dignity like pouring out of their veins.
Mm-hmm.
Men were men, And there you were, really. Indeed, Sheila. I'm from Detroit, so we really are only talking about a 3.5 hour train ride to Gary from
Yes.
Detroit. And so we're in that belt up there. And Detroit, no small player in this game, even back in the
Nope.
day at all. And then Chicago with Jet and Ebony and all the things that Chicago has created in the world of Afro American legacy, in the world of impact, in the world of tragedies, in the world of, South Chicago, in the world of all sorts of things. And then Detroit as well, in the world of Motown, in the world of
Hmm.
Coleman Young, in the world, lots of things going on
Yes.
that really were making statements at the time that up until that time simply weren't.
Yes.
like there was, if you go to Rosa Parks, you can do that. And she herself made statements that couldn't be made prior to her making, actions and statements that can't be done. But you're talking about an entire society here standing for something that didn't exist before them.
Yes. Yes. It's pretty, it was pretty remarkable. And even Rosa Parks, we've been going through my dad's papers and letters, and, we found pictures of him with her. And we were like, well, when was Rosa Parks here? I mean,
Right.
it's like, I mean, seriously, but all inclusive, all included. Muhammad Ali, what's the Joe Louis?
Joe Louis.
Picture of my dad with Joe Louis in the paper,
Mm-hmm.
newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
But these people, these leaders, I should say, because they earned the right.
They most
Uh,
definitely did.
yes, they did. They stuck together. They were up to something bigger than themselves. And while yes, they were human, they were serious about it, though.
So
There was no, yes.
yeah, yeah, and and again, I want to be careful because I'm going to trip over myself here because I might, I don't have the education that I might say something that's actually inaccurate, and then I would hope that you would
It's okay.
gracefully correct me. But even if we look at Abernathy, or we look at the Black Panthers, or we
Hmm.
look at a Malcolm X, if we start looking at this crew, when I say Abernathy, you're not saying which Abernathy. You're not doing that. When I say Malcolm X,
No,
you're not saying Malcolm who? No, you're not doing that. When I say
no.
Angela Davis, you're not saying I'm sorry, Fred. Who are you talking about? Yeah, right. And in the same way, though, and I want to bring this, see if we'll veer away if we need to, but in Detroit, the way this was being, for me, anyways, as a child, approximately your same age, the way this was being manifest was through Motown. That's
Mm,
that's how it
yes.
that's who I played with. I played with Marvin Gaye. I played, and not
Mm-hmm.
officially, he wasn't my next door neighbor, but I played with Little Stevie. I played with Diana Ross. I played with the Temptations. I played with the Four Tops. I played, that's for me, which by the way, those were some pretty cool leisure suits that those dudes were
Oh,
putting
for
on.
sure. Yeah.
That whole step in, that whole choreography, that whole we working together, that whole playfulness, that whole sexiness, that whole sound that'll drive you to heaven, whether you like it or not, was extraordinary and also part of the times contemporarily. Am I right about that? Can you connect those
You
things?
are, yeah, oh my God, you are so right. And here's how it would manifest itself in the community. I mean, first of all, I don't know about you, Dr. Fred, but when we were young, we had one black and white TV.
Right. Me too.
and
Hmm.
and so if Diana Ross and the Supremes were on TV, or the Temptations, or Marvin Gaye, everybody, oh, they're gonna be so, you could hear a pin drop with those seven children,
Hmm.
because we'd be in front of Ed Sullivan
Right.
or whatever show they were on,
They were
watching
on
it.
Ed
And
Sullivan. Let's be sure about that. That's where they were.
that absolutely sure, right? Even when the Beatles came, we were
Yeah,
screaming,
Ed Sullivan.
just like everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the thing about Detroit, my father was in Detroit quite a bit. As a matter of fact, the minister who eulogized my father, Dr. Charles Butler, was a minister in Detroit. So all of that was very, very connected.
Mhm.
And when Dr. King or anyone else, Dr. David Abernathy, traveled, they'd all kind of go to, if they were in Gary in Chicago, it's what, 20 to 30 minutes to the south side of Chicago.
Right.
So from Gary, Indiana.
Right.
So it was all very connected and they all worked together. They all collaborated. Now, I'm not saying they all agreed. I was a kid and I'm sure there were probably some
Maybe.
disagreements and non-alignment,
Sure. Sure.
but for the most part, there was alignment and connection, even in Detroit. And the music, it's funny. I would even say this, and you said I would discover some things here. The music and the love and the music was very much so integrated into what was happening.
Exactly.
Whether intentional or not, but as
Exactly.
we're having this conversation, it was very much so connected, and that soul and that love and even peace,
Yeah, exactly.
was
And how are we forgetting Aretha Frank? How are we forgetting? I mean, there's so many players we could play
oh
here.
my God. Yeah, oh, we can go on
We
and
could go
on.
on and
And
on.
that was
That's right.
yeah, that was such a that was a major part
Hmm.
of that time of the movement. There were so many pieces and so many players throughout the country and through far too many to name.
Far too many to
But
name.
yes.
You know what's so great about this, Sheila, is I am really getting okay. So somehow we've gotten through this conversation and we have not yet said, Barry Gordy. We have not yet said Smokey Robinson. We have not.
Yeah.
It's like, how the hell did we get this far and have those two guys not even mentioned yet?
Well, I guess they were up on the well, I was thinking about them. I just didn't say it, but I as you keep talking, because see, I'll talk forever about this stuff all night long. I'm serious. I have a friend of mine, we'll talk all night long.
Hmm.
But or
Yeah,
my sisters, etc. But yeah, it was a special moment in time and a time that would shape us. It's funny for such a time as now.
hmm, yeah. And then we had
'Cause
our
yes,
colleague, we had our little colleague come out with his gorgeous little suits and his afro and his four brothers. And, it was like when the Jackson Five showed up, and then I had a voice. I had a voice because
mm,
this was my friend. This was, I had to look up a little bit to Stevie Wonder. I had to look up a little bit to these other cats. I was and still am in lustful love of Diana Ross, just to let you know.
oh
I
gosh,
haven't gotten
yes.
over it. I mean, I'm just letting you know that. I'm not.
Look, I flew to Vegas 2 years ago to see her
Uh-huh.
at the Win.
Hmm.
Me and myself and two friends,
Hmm.
childhood dream.
Hmm.
But go ahead.
Yeah, no, they had these two towers in Southfield that were them, and I think the temp stayed there too. And they had soundproof rooms, and that was what we knew as kids is that they had these soundproof rooms in the penthouse, so they would do their, rehearsals and practices and stuff up on the 30th floor of these two main towers in the suburban Detroit. Anyways,
Mm,
let's interdigitate this because one would think that when we're talking about the reverends here, when we're talking about your dad, when we're talking about Reverend Martin or Reverend Ralph or Reverend, when we're talking about these leaders and the women, Coretta, I can only imagine what Coretta really was. I cannot imagine who she really was. What is she? What is she to you? Tell me what, you speak so
oh
high.
my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
This is a great question. Okay, couple things. But can I go back and say one thing
Absolutely.
about
Bring it.
the Jacksons? Michael Jackson, the Jackson, Joe Jackson, Catherine Jackson. They lived right up the street from us.
Hmm. That's right.
And my
They're Gary. They're
brothers,
Gary, aren't they? They
they're
absolutely are.
Gary, Indiana.
Yes, they
And they
are.
played, yes, they had a house that was right behind what we call Midtown Little League field, the baseball field. And both my brothers were great baseball players, and one of my brothers even played in the Senior League World
Hmm.
Series.
All right.
Um, yes, and as a youngster, and but the Jacksons lived right behind the baseball field. So every time you went to the baseball field, they were outside either playing in the backyard or in the house practicing. And I can remember as a little girl, they would win all the before they got discovered. all the contests at Roosevelt High School, and can't think of the name of this auditorium, but there was an auditorium that everybody sang in, and we had contests, etc. So that was another phenomenon to be. There were a lot of great people who came out of that little town
Oh my goodness.
called Gary, Indiana.
Yes.
So I wanted to say that, but now
Coretta. Now, before
here's
we go there,
wait
we
now,
can't.
Fred. This
Gosh, I feel like we
yes,
can't go too far through without including Diana and her route to that whatever she did to mentor or to mother to matriarch. Michael and many others, like to be the mother of Motown or in some ways, and just be yeah.
totally. Diana Ross. Yes, Diana Ross. I just call her the boss. She
No
is the
kidding, she's the
boss.
boss. Absolutely.
Diana Ross is she's just one of my sheroes in life. And like I said, we bought tickets and went to the Win and saw her. Rita and I and
Oh,
another friend,
really?
Michelle.
Awesome. Hmm.
Yes, about 2 years ago. But Diana Ross definitely came. She discovered them. Now there are various different stories, but for sure she was their matriarch. She was so close to
Yeah,
Michael
right.
that Michael
Frightening close.
Jackson actually,
Yeah,
yeah, well, he wanted her to raise his
yeah.
children. So that's how close they were. And I want you to know Michael Jackson, as far as I'm concerned, greatest entertainer that ever
I'm with you.
lived. I've never missed a Jackson 5 or a Michael Jackson concert,
Hmm.
ever.
Hmm. Hmm.
They were just extraordinary. And kudos to their parents, what it took to bring them up during that time.
Right. Oh, well, let's
Yes.
keep this in mind. All the people we've named, kudos,
Yes.
including you.
Oh, thank you.
No,
Yes,
really.
thank you. I
No,
got that.
really.
I got it.
Look, it's the same times. Whether you're raising Michael Jackson or Sheila James, what the hell are you thinking? Look at the times.
Yes.
Like it's incredible.
It is incredible, Dr. Fred. And this story is going to blow you
I'm
away.
ready.
You
I'm
ready?
ready. Bring it.
First of all, you don't know this, but today is Mrs. King's
Well,
birthday.
let's talk about that. That's about time. Now we're talking. Let's bring serendipity into this conversation. Let's roll with that. Beautiful.
So let
Happy
me just
birthday.
let me give you my short story of Mrs. Coretta Scott
All
King.
right.
So she was a good friend of my parents. She came to our home. She did Mother's. Now I do remember her. She did, what did they call it? Women's Day.
Mm-hmm.
She spoke at Women's Day when we went through my parents' library and all their papers. My mother saved everything, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
There was a letter where my dad wrote Mrs. King to come speak, and Miss King wrote him back, and then she had to cancel. So back then there weren't no faxes and texts.
Mm-hmm.
So they wrote back and forth
Yeah.
because the telephone, long distance costs money.
Yeah.
So it was really pretty amazing the amount of communication that was done in letters. But
Yeah.
here's my story. Back in the early 80s, after I also went to Spelman College, which is a historically black college and university. You hear HBCU, but I like to say what that is so people understand. But Mrs. King in 1983, she was doing a community event in Chicago, Illinois, and I happened to be home after
This
graduating
is
school.
83 or
And
93, did you say? I'm sorry.
I think it was
Okay.
83. Yeah, 83.
All right.
So 83, 84. Long story short, my father's in church preaching. And he talks about this big event for community leaders that's happening in Chicago with Mrs. King and Andrew Young
Andrew
and
Young, yeah.
talking about Dr. Andrew Young, and they're creating
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta as a model city. So my father said, "Who wants to go?" So I raised my hand.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say, "Well, Daddy, I really want to go," and he says, "Well, Sheila's for community leaders. You don't even have a job." I said, "Yeah, but I really want to go." He says, "Well," he says, "if they don't fill up." So the bottom line,
They don't
by the
feel
time it's time to go, I go in my father's room. I said, "Daddy, I really want to
it.
go."
Oh boy.
So he takes me and drops me off to Mrs. King. And so we go to the
Whoa.
first day, and Mrs. King is there. And of course, she knows I'm Reverend James' daughter. And the two leaders that work with her come knocking on my door after the event for the day, the first day, and say, "Well, Mrs. King wants you to come to her room." And I'm like, "Well, I'm getting ready to go out. I can't go to her room."
Right.
And so they said, "Well, she wants you to come to her room."
Well, I guess you got to go
So I go
then.
to her
Yeah.
room. Her suite is next to my room. She has put me right next to her
Right.
so she can watch me.
Yeah.
I'm Reverend James' daughter. So I stay in there with her, another leader, Dr. Dorothy Cotton,
Mm,
Dr. Bernard
mm.
Lafayette. I see them in all the films. Now I know who a lot of these people are.
Right.
And we stay up till about 4 in the morning and they're talking about the movement.
Hmm.
And they're talking about this. And remember when Martinette, no, Coretta, and they're arguing and they're talking, and I'm sitting there listening, but I'm a kid, right, in my early 20s. And so it was really great. And so I go to the event the next night. Then after that night, they come knock again. Mrs. King wants you to come to her room. So I come to her room. So the bottom line from that weekend that I wasn't invited to,
That's
Mrs.
the way
King
you roll.
says,
That's great. I just love this.
that's the way I
That is the way
roll.
you roll.
And I said, Mrs. King says, Sheila, why don't you come back to Atlanta and come visit me at the King
Oh
Center?
my goodness.
And so after the few days at the event, my dad, I was going to stay at home and work in Chicago for a while, and I said, he says, well, are you going to go look for a job? I said, no, I'm going to Atlanta. I'm packing. I'm going back to Atlanta. So I came back to Atlanta in 1984 and I did go see Mrs. King at the King Center. Here's what's so great, Fred. First time I went over there, of course I didn't call. And they said, well, Mrs. King is not available. And I said, what do you mean she's not available? She told me to come to Atlanta and come see her. Could you tell her Sheila James is here?
Oh.
And the next thing you know, I was in her office. It was so like, it was just so like,
Oh.
what do you mean? She told me to come.
Oh no,
So
that's unbelievable. All right.
so I began to volunteer, and she and I had our own kind of relationship. And here's where it ended. When she passed away, I was invited as one of the volunteers to attend her
What year was
funeral.
that she passed away, Sheila?
It's funny. I just
Maybe
read her program.
approximately.
Gosh, I don't remember. I just read the doggone program. We'll have to look it up while we're on the
All right,
phone.
go ahead. Go ahead.
But I mean, while we're doing the
Yeah,
podcast, when did Miss King pass?
I'll find out. Go ahead.
Okay, find out real
Yep.
quick. But the bottom line now, here's the knock your socks off. I go to the service. A friend of mine and I went, and you had to take a bus to the church. And we got there, got in, and we sat down. I said, oh, I really don't like this seat. Let's see if we can find another one. We find another one. We sit. When the service starts, the procession starts to come in to my right. And I said, oh, look, they're coming right here. And then I turned to my left. I said, oh, but here comes the family, which were the children, Bernice, Yolanda, Dexter, Marty the Third, some of the family. And then George Bush, George Bush,
Mm,
the Mrs. Bushes,
mm,
the Clintons,
mm.
and who's the other president that was Jimmy
Jimmy
Carter and
Carter.
Rosalynn.
Hmm.
They come right past me and I shake all their hands. So when we get on the bus coming back, I say, Kat, what is the likelihood of anybody shaking four United States presidents' hand
Right.
in one fell swoop?
Right.
And she said, oh, I don't know. I said, well, me neither. And we kind of kept going,
Right.
but it was that kind of phenomenal, extraordinary experiences of which I'll never forget.
That is amazing. That is, I- you know, it is. It's so. Let's see. I have so many places I could go from here. Let me try this one.
I didn't know we were going here tonight, but we're here.
No, but that's my point, and that's really thanks for saying exactly that because that's where I was going to take. I'm going to take it right into what you just said. That I didn't know we were going here, but we're here. So let's party, let's play, let's throw down. There's
Yep.
there when I say that's how you roll, maybe you hear that there's what's it say? You have to be one to know one or something like that. It's like,
Yes.
like I know how that goes. For me, I have stories
Yes.
that look like that. Like I had no business being there. I wasn't even invited. I mean, no one, they weren't expecting, not only were they not expecting me, I was kind of like an uninvited guest. And they're all of a
Yes.
sudden this is happening. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm making a difference. And I'm like Forrest Gump. I'm like, oh, well, look at that. Will you look at that? I didn't shake four presidents' hands back to back to back. I never did that. And frankly, I didn't. I think your life is just speckled with beauty. But I want to ask you about sort of the graceful opportunism that I'm hearing here. It's like,
Mm.
you know, it's not like you're busting down walls. It's like, Dad, can I please go? It's not like I'm going. There's some deep respect in there. And yet there you are. And that, it creates your life as almost as an Atlantan. I mean, right?
Yes.
Isn't this, it sounds like you've been in Atlanta pretty much square business since 84. Am I almost? Maybe.
Yep.
There you go.
That's right. No, it created my whole
It
life.
created your whole life. That particular sort of press, knowing that you had to be at this event in Chicago. I guess it was, and with Andrew Young, and I'm
Yes.
thinking Harold Washington actually. Then that's when I was in Chicago
He
too.
might have been, I think he was
He was
there.
there.
Um,
Hmm.
Marva Collins, who founded that Chicago school, was there.
Hmm.
The first Black superintendent of schools were there.
Hmm.
I took a picture with her. I can't call her name right now.
Hmm.
It was amazing. And I have the most gorgeous, I'll send it to you. I have the most gorgeous picture of myself and Mrs. King that
Well, you
weekend.
do have to
I'll
send it to
send
me,
it
and
to
we'll
you.
put this right up. We'll put it right up for the listeners. Let's put that right up on your profile there, and when we ever, that people can have access to that. That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yes, I will send it to you. I just thought about that. Yes.
All right. Well, let's look.
It,
Go ahead, please.
yeah. No, you go ahead. You
Okay.
go ahead.
So
You
what
lead me.
what I'm saying here is we've looked at a number of things here. So we look at this graceful, we'll call it, for lack of a better word, we'll call it graceful opportunism that allows for a life to have been already led. Like
Mm,
you've already had a life upon life, and you're so deeply rooted in the civil rights movement. You're so deeply rooted in what it takes to press forward social injustice. You're so deeply rooted culture, music, and the arts. And, in 4 a.m. conversations in a hotel room with Coretta arguing whether or not Martin did this or that. Um, and we might have a tendency to get starstruck in that situation. Like, oh my God, I'm just a
mm,
spectator. It's like little old me got to hang out with those players. But now we're going to go to the next space, which is, Sheila, you really are one of those players.
mm.
You,
Yes.
you really are. And there's a responsibility and an accountability, and in these days, an urgency, if not an emergency, to own our slots as someone who has the tools to make a difference, been blessed
Mm,
with the tools and if dare I say, the network of conversations that allows us to make a difference, that calls us forward
yes.
to literally make a difference.
Mm,
That's what look, we can both get stars. We spoke earlier about some of the famous people I
yeah.
had luck to be, sort of fortunate
Yeah.
to interface with. It's great. It's great. I love saying that I was there when he or she did that, or I shook his hand, or I actually stayed at their house, or I love saying that. I mean, there's something cool about that from a spectator standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But from the from the on the ground standpoint, like, oh, well, all that really did, if I really want to look at this, is serve me up with the tools to move where we are now into a future that has not happened yet.
Mm,
Like, I have those tools because I've been with people who can do that. I've watched people do that. I've not only watched, I have been part of people doing that. And now, you could say now, in the most urgent of times ever, we're called on to do that, and we don't even get to shy away. Like, no, 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 I'm not Coretta. You're looking for Coretta. I'm sorry, I'm Sheila.
That's right.
You're looking for Martin. I'm just Fred. Sorry. Martin's not here
Mm,
anymore. Sorry, he would have helped you out, but we don't get to actually say that.
mm,
We're called on to be this. So what does that look like, Sheila? Because who I know you as is a mover and shaker at a very high level right now. So we're back to this question is, with all of this, who is Sheila James? No kidding. We've got that you're the progeny of extraordinary upbringing
Mm.
and experiences that are beyond fathomable. We got that. We got that. Completely defer to those credentials. But
Mm.
Sheila, who is Sheila James now moving forward?
Well, Sheila James now has created a company, and inside that, what I'm up to is empowering people, society, and humanity through empowerment coaching, consulting, docuseries, media, and storytelling. I'm also the creator and host of Sheila Speaks, a podcast designed to empower, educate, inform, and impact you, community, and life. I do a show called Facebook Live Coaches and Coffee to empower people throughout the week. So what I'm really about at the core of me is I can see things all over the place, as you can kind of hear from my upbringing. What I'm about is connectivity, connecting those things together, connecting commitments that one has to the available resources for the empowerment of all. And what I've really been, Dr. Fred, inquiring into this year is we're at a place, and I'm going to say, we could say the world, but I'm going to say the United States of
Yeah,
America,
okay.
where what's wanted and needed, we don't need to reinvent. There's invention, imagination, and innovation
Mm-hmm.
and transformation,
Mm-hmm.
as you and I both know, participate and engage in.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been that. In one of my aspects in life, I worked for a company where and did transformational work that's the leader in the field of transformation, Landmark Worldwide. So here's what I stood for was that when the South transforms, the world will transform.
Mm-hmm.
When the South
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, because it is stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean stuck is stuck. It's stuck. When that transforms, not part of the United States, Dr. Fred, hear me,
Mm-hmm.
the world will
Mm-hmm.
transform.
I got that. Yeah.
So I've been working also and engaged in I don't know if it's going to be a course program. I don't know how God is going to work it through me, but I do see something profound in leadership, racism, and transformation that I haven't heard anyone hit on. I'm not going to hit on it yet here, but I'll just say I'm engaged in that work and it will come to fruition through me or through someone else. But that's who I am.
Right.
I am, I don't know if that answered your question,
Well,
but that's who I am and that's what I'm about.
yeah, no, it answers my question, and it's almost a question that asks to go beyond the limitations of any answer that you can give me.
Mm,
So thanks
yeah.
for the answer, but that's
Mm.
that's that's do you understand? As soon as you give an answer, of course, then you've gotten off the road. That's not really what we're asking here.
That's so great. I got it.
Yeah.
I love the way you said that too.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other piece. I could say it's unknown, but what came up for me was to be continued, to be further explored.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, to be further explored.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's the God isn't finished with me yet.
No, obviously not. And
But what you can count on is I have surrendered to his will. And where I have not surrendered, I will.
this
Who I am is I
I
will.
will. So, okay, let's see if I can roll this back. So I'm a Jewish boy from Detroit, and
Hmm.
made that clear already. At least maybe not the Jewish part, but here we go. And many of these men, and in their legacy, in their reputation, and even in how you describe them, even though they're your neighbors or essentially your family, leave the
Hmm.
name Reverend on the front edge of who they are. It's
Hmm.
almost improper to just call Martin Luther King Jr. even. It's like Actually, you're
Yeah.
missing a key part of his name.
Yes.
And it's not even Reverend Martin Luther King, is it? It's actually the Reverend.
Doctor. No, it's doctor.
Doctor. Oh, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And
Sometimes they'll say Reverend Doctor, but go ahead.
yeah, so this is my point. So you bring up God a few times here,
Mm,
and God gets rolled into who these men were, or men and women, who these leaders, who these soon to be, icons, these people who made stuff happen, who really literally changed the course of human interaction globally.
mm,
And left the name Reverend, which it's not everyone who carries around the name Reverend, and there seems to be a implication of being down here to do God's work. Now,
mm.
I could be really, I might be misinformed or misled there, but I'd like you to point to that because you pointed to God in this I will just now. And I'm wondering if there's a relationship. I mean, for instance, it's not Reverend Michael Jackson, for instance. And it could be. And it's not Reverend Stevie
Yeah.
Wonder. It's not quite Reverend, it's not quite. But there's something about these world shakers whose names are now in the archives of time that often they're associated with their relationship with the church, Reverend, God, etc. Is there something there that you can help us dig into?
Wow. Well, I heard so much when you said what you just said, right? Well, I'm just going to be authentic because that's the only way I
Yeah, yeah.
know how to
Try
be,
that out.
really.
Go ahead and try that one out. That's the best way.
Okay. I've always had a fear that I was a preacher.
Hmm. That's great.
Okay, it's funny. I've never said that out
Oh,
loud
that's
to too
so
many
great.
people.
That's so great.
So now I just kind of went public, okay?
Okay, we'll give it to you.
I've always had that, but not like a fear like it was something wrong, but that really wasn't who I was. I don't think that's who I am. I mean, I even used to ask the question back and forth. And at this conjecture in my life, I've found myself at home as one who is, I'll use this word, a minister in the context of transformation.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't necessarily call myself a reverend, although I very much so believe in God, accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. I do. And, but the distinction, reverend, in that context, I have not discovered that for myself.
Okay.
If it is to be discovered, however, there is a voice. A lot of the work I did on myself throughout the years was finding my voice. And through some of the tools that are available, like this one right here, this platform, etc., I've been able to, I will just say, begin to find my voice. That's the only way I see that I can at this point speak to what the question or what you just said in language.
Hmm.
That has been a fear of mine, but not like a fear like I couldn't be, but I just didn't get that's who I was based on what Sheila knows about Sheila, not any other reality
So
test.
that you're in some ways, are you suggesting that you didn't know you might be worthy or responsible or accountable? Or is which of those things?
I would say it would more be like worthy.
Yes. Yes.
Could you hear it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
wouldn't think, I was a girl who listened, but mostly I was considered to some degree a bad little girl, smart, went to school, did the so-called right things, but very mischievous. That word was
Yep.
not accidental that I used it. Here's where I am now is stepping into that. Now that is the path. You're never too young, you're never too old. However, the path I'm on, no, let me say that another way. I'm on the path. I'm on a path. Let me just say
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So that was, I don't have a direct answer. I'm kind of like engaged in it as you're speaking to me, as we're having this conversation.
Right. Okay, so we're really wow. Okay, so let's take this, see if we can go at least one more level out. Let's see if I can take it here.
Okay.
Some of the relief and perhaps some of the release and perhaps, so you got the different relief, release, some of the possible opportunities to create into this, what appears to be a world that is maybe closing in or clamping down or threatening our freedom or our autonomy, our independence, the kind of things that for sure are the people that we've been talking about all conversation were also engaged in. That absolutely the most it had ever been was when they were doing it, and then when they were taking
Mhm.
forth. Some of the answers here I hear from the people that I find the most compelling is, in fact, to leave this conversation and hover over the top, like take it into the next dimension, like spiritualize it, or in its overseeing, take it into the next realm, like be a person who sees the broader, almost unspeakable nature
Mm.
uh, that the expansion of consciousness allows for
Mm.
as a way of managing what the heck is going on down here. You know,
Mhm.
for me, by the way, it's my only when I don't do that, I get stuck. I get afraid of suffocation. I get hopeless, and then my only chance is to somehow see, oh no, right this moment is my this is my time. This is my time.
Mm.
This
Mm.
is what the spirit of life has given me right here. This is way grander than the three-dimensional world that were in some ways compelled or even imprisoned to carry on within. So I wonder if Reverend, and they got to sort of choose their name, but if Reverend, or in your case, possible Reverend or preacher, or whatever you want to say or be afraid of, in some ways, when you say you're not worthy, it's really just speaking to the awe of the position, right? You're not worthy of
Mhm.
being awed at that level. You just assume
Mm.
be a like a mischievous little girly troublemaker, and you probably are, and at least were that. And in order to take on these problems, there's an otherworldliness that's required to me.
Mm. Yes.
And maybe that's why carrying the name Reverend allows for us to look a little bit up at the podium at these folks, a little bit
Mm.
on the, yep, they're a couple steps up on us, aren't they? They're a couple steps closer than us.
Yes.
And maybe I don't want to be that. I'm just little Freddie myself. I'm same thing, by the way. I'm little Freddie. I don't know
Yeah.
anything about carrying extra weight or anything. That's not me. And yet maybe now's our time, Sheila. Maybe that's what's here.
Yes.
What do you have to say about any of that?
I think it was well said, and I think that it is our time. It's my time, and this is my first time being disengaged with you, and for sure, it's your time. The time is now.
Mm-hmm.
That's all there is now. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing else but now. I think it's our time, and I think it's now. And whether I have a reverend in front of my name, or a doctor, or attorney, or any of that, I have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a song we sang, and I don't know if you knew this song. This little light of mine,
Yeah.
I'm going to let it shine.
Let it shine. Let it
And for
shine.
me,
Mm-hmm.
let it shine everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my intention. And I'm doing that now with a new hope for what's possible, a new possibility, a new future. And this is a new moment in time for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see.
It's amazing, right? And there's something both, for me, there's something like fear sets in. I suppose that's the fear of awe.
Yes.
There's excitement that sets in, like, oh yeah, I guess I'm up to, speaking of baseball, I guess I'm up to bat.
Up the bat.
I guess
That's
I guess
right.
I'm up to bat now. I guess I'm out of the dugout, and I'm even out of the on deck circle. I can take the donut off my bat now, put
Yep.
my helmet on, and step
Mm,
up to, in my case, the left side of the plate,
mm.
and put that bat on my shoulder and bring it. Let's go. Let's go. Never been more ready. Give me, give me what you got here. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And by the way, was your family Tiger fans or White Sox or Cubs, or where were you?
Oh gosh, when we were, that was another thing. We were Cub fans, although my father would take all of us to the Cubs and the White Sox, and I was there when there was Billy Williams and Ernie Banks
Oh my
and
God.
Ron Santo and
Yeah.
I know baseball. That was my first
We should
love of
have
sports
another
was baseball.
conversation just about baseball,
Yes,
because I know baseball. It's almost like I do. I know about Williams, Sano, and Banks. I know all
yes,
about those
that's
guys, and let's
it.
play too. Let's go. Let's play too. And
Fergie Jenkins, all of them.
so I have a little story about Gary, Indiana too. Gary, Indiana is completely instrumental in me becoming a doctor. Did you know
Wow.
that? You didn't know. How could
No,
you
I
know
didn't
that?
know
It's a
that.
little quick story, but I can make it last really long. If there's nobody else talking at the bar, I can make this story go a really long time. But I'll just make it go for a minute here. The second year that I applied to medical school, the first year I didn't get accepted at the three schools I applied for, thinking that I would be accepted in Michigan. So I started applying outside of the state, and got my application all prepped up, and then applied outside of the state, and Northwestern University in downtown Chicago accepted me to at least be interviewed. And so I stayed with a man. Maybe you even know him. He's just an amazing, he's one of
Mm,
the few. He was the president of his class, the class right in front of me. Afro American doctor named Charles Maudlin. I stayed with him at the in the dorm that night in Chicago, preparing for my interview the next day. Anyways, on our way in, I took the train, the Amtrak from Detroit to Chicago. And it was the
mm.
coldest day I'd ever experienced in my life, literally. And it gets cold up there every so often. And
Oh
it was
yeah.
way cold. It was one of those, oh yeah, this is way cold. This is way cold. It was so cold that the train tracks froze in Gary, Indiana.
I believe it.
So the train had to stop in Gary,
Mm,
Indiana.
wow.
And I had to be there in the morning for my interview. And it was snowing and freezing. So they gave us something like 8 Gary, Indiana buses, school buses, that we got
Mm.
off the Amtrak and got on these buses. It's like, freezing. They moved us into these yellow buses to ride us into Union Station. And I was like, well, what? And by the way, there's 1983, just to be honest with you. So that we're talking about the same exact year there.
Wow.
I started medical school in downtown Chicago in 1984. So that's how I knew the Harold Washington and all that.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so there I was, and the next morning, I had to walk up and down Chicago Avenue to get myself some shoe shine, because I wanted to be. I figured it was one thing to do. So I walked up and down. I walked up Chicago Avenue all the way to Michigan all the way to Michigan from Lakeshore up to actually up to State. Anyways, it was so cold, Sheila, that the next day for the interview, there was 5 of us scheduled, and the ones from out of town didn't make it. I'm sorry, the ones from
Wow.
in town didn't make it. The ones from North Shore, they couldn't make it because there was too much snow. It was too cold. So only me and this girl from San Diego made it for the interview. And they had the interview, and those other 3 people did not get accepted to medical school. But me and Debbie M, it'd be great if she's hearing this, we made it. We were accepted to Northwestern University because of our tenacity, because we kept on coming all night long until we made it to our interview the
Wow.
next morning. And so Gary has that space for me, just to saying. I wind us down with that story. Perhaps it's entertaining, and maybe it's only entertaining to me.
Yes.
But in the end, that's what created Dr. Fred here. So
Mm.
that's kind of cool. And
Congratulations. That was
I
awesome.
know it really was. And I did
Yeah.
Northwestern right. I mean, sort of. They did me right, sort of. And now I still get to be Dr. Fred and I spent the next 5 years in Chicago, my favorite town, and in and out of Gary many, many, many times. So awesome. So super
Wow.
cool. Sheila, how can people find you if they want to find you? And how can people catch up with you, or if they want to learn from you or follow you, or just, get in contact with you if they're turned on by what you've been talking about, or if they want to ask you a question? How are people gonna track you down?
How people can get in touch with me, my website is www.saint jamesmedia.com. From there, you can email me. My phone number is there. I'm also on public 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Facebook Live every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Coaches and Coffee. And also, my podcast is Sheila Speaks, and you can find it anywhere.
All right.
Sheila Speaks.
That is so great,
Yeah.
because so I'm going to point out something here. I think it's a great one to close on. It's so funny that me and you are sitting here. I like to be Dr. Fred because it sort of washes down the Dr. Moss part. It's like, it lets me be a little bit silly and mischievous. And we talked
Yes.
about the doctor of your dad. I'm sorry, Dr. Martin
Dr.
Luther
King.
King, and then the reverence of all these men and all that, and our fear and our awe, and maybe what about preacher and minister like that, and yet you have the
Yes.
audacity to call yourself Saint James, which is just hilarious.
Oh my goodness. Isn't that something?
Isn't that hilarious? It is. It's
Well,
beautiful.
it's the closest I'm gonna get, I
I
think.
guess so. I guess so. So brilliant. So brilliant. All right. Well, there you have it, listeners. I told you, right? It's so worth it. I'm so glad you've stayed the time. I hope you've had even partially the amount of fun that I've had with Sheila, and I think that Sheila's had with me and with you. It's been another wonderful, wonderful, fun time, and really so informative. And we dug in, Sheila. We dug into some pretty cool stuff here.
We
We
did.
did. And it's really been a deep pleasure. And, creating a lifelong collegial friendship with you is, I think, what just got created. So that's pretty terrific as well. And maybe
Absolutely.
that's why we waited till today to have our conversation. So
That's right. Maybe I'll have you do part of the foreword for my
I
book.
would love that. It would be, oh my gosh, that would be a complete honor. I would absolutely love that. That's great. So
Awesome.
awesome indeed. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for listening. It's always a pleasure and it's just an honor. And I know that whatever you're going through and whatever's here that we've talked about, I'm just trusting that it just kind of rubbed you in a positive way. I'm sure hoping that. And what's ever going on in your
Yes.
life, right? What's ever going on in your life, now's the time. The time is actually now. God's not done with you either. God's not done with Sheila.
That's right.
God's not done with me. And actually, God's not done with you. And that's why you're still
Mm.
here. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. It's been a beautiful time. Sheila, thank you. Thank you. I love you. And
Love you too.
thank you. We'll catch you on the backside. And don't forget, just, remind yourself, welcome to humanity. That's all this is, just humanity. Welcome to humanity. Bye for now.
Hey, welcome to Humanity Family. It's Ryan Levesque here, co-producer of the show. I truly hope you enjoyed Dr. Fred's in-depth conversation today. If you did, and if the conversations we share each week are making a difference for you, could you please take just a moment to leave a rating and a short review on Apple Podcasts? Your enthusiastic review helps new listeners discover the show. Your support here really does make a difference. I'd also like to invite you to reach out to a friend or two who would appreciate today's episode. Maybe shoot them a quick text or email, or maybe pick up the phone and invite them to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast so they can be enriched from the discovery of amazing ideas and insights each week. As always, you can find past episodes along with the complete show notes and links at welcometohumanity.net/podcast. If you'd like to explore how working one-on-one with Dr. Fred can help you break through whatever challenges you might be facing with your mental health or well-being, leading to new levels of freedom and vitality, I invite you to reach out to us directly by emailing Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. That's DRFRED at welcometohumanity.net. Thanks so much for listening, and keep an ear out for another captivating conversation next week. Have a beautiful day, a beautiful week, and indeed, a beautiful life. Welcome to humanity.